Hello, and welcome to episode 49 of No Particular Reason. I am your host, Yanko, and here next to me it's my wonderful co-host, Kerri Lewis, who's back this episode. Yes, 100%. Welcome back, Kerri.
Yeah,
Nice to have
I
you back.
am. Yo, listen, it is a beautiful day when I am functioning. Actually, I slept in today and I feel amazing.
Wonderful. Yeah. Um, it's one of those days on Fridays. Like it was very unexpected, but that's how we roll, people. We just show up and we get the show going for no particular reason. Anything you would like to talk about today on our episode? You want to anything that kind of excites you and gets you going, or any particular topic you want to bring out?
Love. I definitely want to talk about love because I fundamentally believe that it's something that most people fear. We talk about it so freely and yet when I work with people around love, there's a lot of resistance. There's a lot of stories around love based on condition and expectation, and not at all. I guess there's not a strong understanding that real love, the love that we exist in, is free from expectation. It's unconditional and it's not. It doesn't need to be reciprocated, and you can give it freely.
Right. Because that's the default mode of operation on most people, but they just don't know their love and they operate in love. This is a really good topic though, because I kind of feel the same way as you do, because a lot of people understand it and they think it's one of those things, and a lot of the times they even use it to manipulate you and shame you into doing things by saying, well, don't you love me, or won't you do that for me, or like, okay, that's not how it works. And then there is the tough love too, where deep down what has to get done, still love the person, but
Well,
you
it's so
know
interesting. So I want to give you two scenarios, right? Somebody you introduced me to, I won't put them on blast. We were just shooting a shit, and I happened to send this individual um a picture of me, Nana, and the girls in our state of play, because the whole context of conversation was around joy
mm,
and stuff. And so I mean, I connect with a lot of people, so I didn't think anything of it. Fast forward, I sent a random text like 2.5 weeks later around something. I don't know. And this individual was like, "Oh, I was really cautious about texting because I wasn't sure if you were implying that that person was your boyfriend or best friend." Like, what did anything have to do with texting? Like, and that's a made up story that we have, guys, is that like I'm not going to reach out because I might step on, offend, whatever. My relationship with Nana is beautiful, but it doesn't determine the connection that I create with other people. Sure, like there are certain expectations, right? I'm intimate with only Nana, but other than that, I give love freely. Like the bounds of love doesn't need to be separated just because I'm in relation to somebody. But that so often we create these stories that, oh, because of this, I can't um be vulnerable or connect deeply with this person. And that's just bull crap. And it really prevents us from sharing in true, deep, meaningful, unconditional connection.
yeah, yeah. I can relate to that, because I see people make up all kinds of stories in their heads all the time, because most of the people operate from their past memories and experiences. So they constantly compare what happened in the past with the present. or anytime they're in a scenario, they'll bring up an experience that they had in the present from the past and compare it to what's going on right now, which is kind of like how pretty much anybody is, because otherwise you're not going to make sense of most of the stuff that it's going on around you.
Yeah, sorry guys. In full transparency, we not Nana. See, this is Yanko and I had a guest scheduled, and at the moment she's trying to get in. So I'm just going in and looking at that. Go ahead, keep talking about love, Yanko, because I'm distracted and I can't sit here and honestly respond to what you said because I wasn't present.
No, that's all right. I'm sure we're gonna do the best to bring our guest in, and it'll take a little bit, but that's usually the how life is. It's very unexpected. You just go through things, and if something happens, you get the experience, and if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. It wasn't meant to be, or whatever way you want to figure it out. But back to what I was saying about people coloring their reality, that's usually how it is. And I catch myself do that a lot of the times where I just sit in being present in situation or something that it's unfolding, and I can see that my mind will bring up experiences from the past to try to make sense of it or to compare it. And if you just wait long enough, then you figure out that it's not what your mind is saying. It could be like totally different thing that it's happening. Um, so yeah, in how that is colors a lot of people's reality and expectation of love and how they operate. So that's
Um,
all I had.
well, so
Yeah.
here's the thing. Sorry, I guys, can we just let's talk about this for real. I am not a fan of multitasking. I don't think that we're meant to multitask. Our brain can switch from one task to another very quickly, but to truly be present means that we're not wired to multitask. And so I'm just keeping it 100. I really try to focus on the thing that I'm presently doing, and I still wasn't listening to Yanko, which, you know, is either neither here nor there because I have nothing but love for you. I'm just trying to
Oh.
just just trying to get my beautiful Barb on this show, but it may have to be another day because that's just what the universe is telling me needs to happen.
I mean, whatever has to happen has to happen. That's the bottom line. But back to what we are just saying, uh, my mind was just going like, "Oh, this isn't happening!" Like, "Oh my god!" It's like, "Oh, there it is." All right.
Let's see, we made it happen, and I don't have to multitask anymore and actually
There you
get be
go.
present for
Let,
this
let's
conversation.
let's bring out our guest.
Yay! Hey,
There you
Kerri,
go.
I made it. I don't
I
know what
love
happened.
it.
That was not when I looked at the top, that was not the link. I don't know. But when I signed on, there was someone else's name and they were like, "Do you want to stream there?" And I'm like, "No." So I don't know. Well, anyway, I'm here. Yay.
And you know what?
Yay.
Our show's called for no particular reason for that reason because Yanko and I literally go with the flow. We truly
Okay.
and you know what, guys? First off, I just want to introduce my dear friend, Barb Nango, who is a boundaries coach and obviously is somebody who works with people who struggle with addiction and mental health. Boundaries are paramount to
Huge.
really
Yes.
overcoming that type of struggle. So I am in deep appreciation and gratitude for her work. But moreover, when we talk about going with the flow, I've blown off Barb twice now, and I love her because the last time I was supposed to interview her, I was so zenned out in meditation. I'm like, I'm too peaceful. Like, there's no way I'm going to be present for this woman in a meaningful way. And she's like, yeah, and I'm like, oh, she's my people. So thank you for being.
Oh, you're welcome. Shit happens.
Yeah, yeah, it's so true. Well, I also think that Yanko and I were just talking about unconditional love. And I think that ties into expectation. And when we create these expectations and then make up stories when those expectations aren't met, that's where we separate ourselves up off from connection and deep, true unconditional love.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned expectations, because overcoming unrealistic expectations has been a gigantic part of my recovery. I'm in 12-step recovery, which is where I learned boundaries. And it's one of the things I have to focus on a lot with my clients, because they have these expectations of themselves, other people, and the world that are just not based in any kind of reality. Even though they have volumes of evidence, that's never going to happen, which was me too. For example, I worked for the same boss for 19 years. I loved her dearly, but I also had a 19-year codependent relationship with her. And she was one of the most unreliable humans I've ever met. And she was since the day I met her. And the story I kept telling myself is she should be, she should show up on time. She should do what she says she's going to do. She should not blow people off. She should stick to the agenda in a meeting. And she's never done it. And I got mad at her for not being different than she was since the day I met her.
Isn't it so funny? And for 19 years, this is the crap we do to ourselves. Guys, the day my older sister died and my children's father wasn't able to emotionally support me, and even further than that, went to work, I was livid, but he had given me evidence for 14 years that he was going to do that. And so I really had to look at myself and be like, dude, this is completely on you and has nothing to do with him, because he has shown you for 14 years that he cannot emotionally support you.
Right. Yeah. One of the things that's just come to me in the last year is that there's a difference between reasonable and unrealistic expectations. So I worked at Yale University. In a professional setting, it is reasonable to expect a professional adult to show up on time, do what they say they're going to do, and follow through. However, for this particular woman, it was an unrealistic expectation, because I had volumes of evidence that she wasn't going to do it. It's reasonable for a woman whose sister dies to expect her life partner to be emotionally supportive of her. But in your particular case with that man, it's unrealistic, because he'd given you volumes of evidence that's not who he is.
Yep. Yeah, and we look for what it is we want from the person, not what they're actually offering.
Right. Yes. Right. And so the beauty is we get to give that to ourselves, either actually give it to ourselves or seek it from someone who is actually capable of giving it to us.
Yeah. Which is why I think it's really clear to get clear on what your needs are prior to entering into any type of relationship, whether it's within the structure of a career, whether it's in the structure of parenting, right? Whether it's in the structure of relationship. Where we so often jump into situations with no idea about what it is we need for ourselves, and then as a result we feel like we're let down, disappointed, we feel victimized.
Yeah, we're like grasping
life. When really we never got clear in the first place, because once we get clear, guess what? The universe provides. I got very clear about who it is I want in my personal space. And guess what? The people that didn't meet those needs kind of shed away. And the friendships and the relationships that did meet those needs kind of I attracted to, i.e. like my relationship with Yanko, my partnership with Nana. But I wouldn't have had that until I got clear about what it was that I was willing to be open to, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I would call that boundaries, getting clear on what your boundaries are, like what's okay and not okay. What do you like? What do you want? What do you need? What do you prefer? And what I hear from clients all the time is, well, I don't know what I want. I don't know who I am. Well, I know. That's why you're doing boundaries coaching.
Yeah.
Because you're trying to figure, I think of it as like, what are the boundaries of Barb? Where do I end and other people begin? I didn't know that, despite 50 something years of being very introspective, almost 40 years of therapy, and 30 something years of the personal development, the retreats and workshops and, all that kind of stuff. And I think for me, I think of all that stuff as having scratched the surface of the iceberg of my life, and recovery melted the iceberg of my life, partly because my core wound is codependence and I learned how to build boundaries, but also because one of my programs is a trauma recovery program where you reparent yourself and you use the 12 steps to recover. I didn't know I had trauma. I didn't know I had intergenerational family dysfunction. I didn't know I didn't know any of that. And I was also super introspective. So like, what's happening for people that aren't even trying,
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
usually
so
I
what do you
think
got, Yanko?
I think that's part of like your normal, that you think it's normal, whatever your normal is.
Mhm.
How you growing up, you think this is the normal, and then everything else outside that normal, it's not normal. Then you
Mhm.
don't figure out what's normal and what it's not normal until you kind of go on with life, and you
Mhm.
start to go and say, well, wait a minute, if like 40 or 50 people say that's not normal and you think this is normal, there's something wrong here in that bigger picture. So I think a lot of the time people don't know because that's their normal, and when they get out of their normal,
Mhm.
that causes them stress.
Mhm.
Because like, say if screaming in your household it's normal, then when you go at the workplace or whatever, it feels like it's not normal. It's weird because nobody's screaming around. That's not your
Right.
normal state of operation. So
Well,
Yeah.
yeah.
but
Yeah.
interestingly,
Screaming was in my household for sure. Absolutely. Yeah.
well, but here's the interesting thing, right? So the three of us study the brain extensively. So if that's what we know, guess what? That's what we attract. And so we would
Mhm.
attract environments in our workplace where it was more likely that there would be screaming, or at least passive aggressiveness, or like dysfunction in it, because that's what we know
Mhm.
and we attract that. But I do also think that that is where um the universe, God, however you define spirit for you, I personally think it's pure love, interjects and plants seeds. So then we have these moments where we bear witness to something different, and then we decide, oh, that's interesting, and then we start to think about what it could be like to have that experience as well, and that's where, for the people who aren't doing the work at all, yeah, it's gonna feel pretty hard, because you're just on replay of like the same
Mhm.
old thing
Right. The
over and
neural
over.
pathways. Yeah. They're
Yeah,
well paved. Yeah.
yeah. So I'm curious, what comes to mind when you think of the word unconditional love, Barb?
I think that, so I happen to use the word God to describe my higher power. And I feel like that's really the only true place that we can get it. I'm not a parent, so I can't talk about being unconditionally loving children. I would like to think that I can unconditionally love other humans, but that's not been my experience. And I have not had the experience of being unconditionally loved by other humans as well. I'm not saying it's not possible. I think it's rare. I think that's the aspiration. But I grew up in a household where love was very conditional.
Yeah,
Like, you don't get love unless you toe the line. So, but I love the idea. I think it's easier for me to love unconditionally at the macro level than it is like the individual humans. I believe in it. So, like, when there are people, like, I don't pay attention to politics
yeah,
and
no,
current events or anything. It's just not good for my nervous system. But I do, obviously, I hear some of the stuff that's coming through. And so, like, I can pray for individuals that are perpetrating some of the things and like send love their way and hope that it penetrates, and that it has and I believe it does have an impact, or I wouldn't do it. But if I met that person right in front of me, it would be very difficult for me to practice unconditional love with them. So it's more like, when I'm thinking about it globally and then in theory.
yeah.
So that's what comes to mind for me.
I mean, I love that answer because I think that is very true for a lot of people. I I I feel that way to a degree, but it's interesting because I think if I'm engaged with somebody who challenges my ability to love them unconditionally, I really look at what's coming up for me and examine what I need to release for myself because it's a story or a belief, right? It's this idea that, and so as challenging as it is sometimes, I always welcome that experience because in that I truly peel back the layers even more deeply of my subconscious that cause me to resist that because for you identify with God. I've studied world theology, but I've also studied quantum physics that truly gives us the evidence that I need anyway. I can't speak for anybody else to hold true to that resolve of love because it's just much more powerful. And at the end of the day, it will win the day if I can break down the stories that are preventing me from staying in that vibration. So I think at the end of the day, it's always about choice. It's that moment to moment choice of what's coming up for me, right? Examining it and then deciding, am I going to actively sit in like resistance to, or am I going to let go? And that's where I love Dr. David R. Hawkins' work, uh, letting go, a pathway to surrender, because it's just real time, moment to moment to moment to moment to moment, and then it's just choices we make. And I'd be curious what your thought on that is, Yanko, because you've experienced things a little differently than both Barb and I.
Yeah, to me, it's a bit different. I was gonna say it's totally different experience. To me, I find that everything else it's reflecting back at me like mirror outside. So a lot of the situations when something presents itself in a situation, then I'll go back because I won't necessarily have a memory that'll pop up associated with that. I try to relate because a lot of people, I was talking about that at the beginning, when they operate, they bring up their, experiences. And when they bring up their experiences, that colors their now because they're going in the past, bringing something that's similar to what's unfolding and then comparing it and saying, is this like that or is this going to happen like because that happened to me before so maybe this was going to happen now so it doesn't it doesn't really work that way with me. Sometimes I get those but a lot of the times I don't. A lot of the times I'm in just what's happening and what's unfolding and then I can see how that's reflecting and when that presents itself, then I can go and compare it and say, well, why is this happening? Why am I getting out of this experience now? Like, why is this experience unfolding in this very moment? And then I can have an aha moment and say, oh, I see. Like, this isn't happening because somebody hates me or somebody wants to do something or to impact me negatively or positively. It's just an experience that it's happening and it doesn't even have to be about me. It could be them projecting whatever in that moment. I might be becoming the mirror for them, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
That's how I'm experiencing it. So it's a bit different than a lot of the people, but my experience has always changed because like we constantly change. So I can't be expecting to have the same experience twice or three times, or even go back in childhood memory and say, "Oh, I remember the taste of my grandma's cookies or whatever, and I want to have this again." And you never can have the same experience. So and that also kind of puts me in the zone because every experience that I have, I realize that it's a once in a lifetime opportunity experience that I might not have that experience again. So might as well enjoy the experience, good or bad, because it's just unfolding and you have the opportunity to enjoy it instead of being in your mind um, fantasizing about things related to the experience.
Have you always been like that, Yanko, or did you change to being that way? Because that seems like ideal but unusual in terms of being able to just be in the moment and not carry the past with you and expectations.
No, I haven't been like that. I had a near death experience 6 years ago or so.
Okay.
And that kind of changed the whole perspective of like what's going on. I started to appreciate more and more things that are happening, because when you're living in your fantasy la la land, you always have this kind of like understanding that life goes on infinitely and indefinitely, and you always have chances to experience whatever you're experiencing. It's not like once in a lifetime kind of thing. And then when you're forced to see that every beginning has an end and you're in your end, then you get to regret things looking back and say, well, it was a good ride, but like I don't remember anything out of it because it just went like this. Uh, and then when you come out of that experience, you're like, maybe I need to slow down and just be more present and be in the moment and have more of that experience instead of um, having allowing your mind to always project the next good thing, or like, I'm not gonna watch this, I'm just gonna jump into the next thing that's gonna unfold for me, or maybe this is better than what's going on right now. Or example, you might be having a conversation with somebody, but then your mind comes in and says, what's for dinner? Let's think, this is more interesting now because now you're hungry. Maybe it'll be good for like be in your head thinking about what you're going to eat instead of having conversation with the person that it's there. I mean, dinner's not going to go away, you're going to be home. But then that's the other thing, once you start munching in the food, then you realize that this is kind of boring and your mind wants something else, and then you turn the TV on or some other entertainment, and you never in the present. You're always projecting to
Yep.
something else.
Which is why, I fundamentally, like, one of my core values is curiosity. I work toward not even assuming that I know Barb. When she walks into this space today, it's not what the collection of interactions we had prior to today is. It's what is the experience that we're going to have in this moment, and can I allow it to unfold without this idea of what it needs to be, which is why I love our show for no particular reason. Because again, to the point that you bring up, Yanko, you're a completely different person every time we interact with each other, whether you're talking about your son or whether you're talking about
Right.
whatever. And so when we really can suspend what we think we know, and it takes a lot of effort. Like at times it does take a lot of effort, but it's a choice that I always walk into a situation and make. I gain such beautiful insights, and I learn so much from each interaction I have with people because there isn't this preconceived notion of who that person is and how they show up in the world. It's
And it
weird.
gets even, and it might even get weird. The more you get to know somebody, then you might find out that they play different roles every time. Like you said, they're seem different, but they're the same person outside. But depend on how they're showing up in that moment and the role that they're playing in that moment, then um, their mind will flick and they'll play that role. And after they're done with that role, moving to the next thing, then that'll be different. And I'll give examples of what I'm talking about. Is that um, when you're a father, then you play the role of a father. But then when you're not in that situation, your kids are not around, you're not playing the role of father, and you're running your business, then you might be the businessman or the coach or somebody else, and you play that role. So it's like you're having split personalities per se, or many different personalities that come to play every time. Depends on the role that you're playing. And then it gets even better when you understand that and you start having fun with it, because life it's fun. Then you might get even more creative. For the people that ever perform on stage or anything, they know they have a certain script and you gotta be by the script. But then in the moment of the play, you might get inspired to do something else and be spontaneous and say, oh, or laugh or something else. So then life becomes that much better when you realize that you got the opportunities to play the roles different. So that puts a little spike on the top and makes it a little different, in my opinion.
Yeah, so it sounds like you're saying not just have no expectations that other people will be the same, but also have expectations that you will not always be the same.
Right.
Which I
That's
love,
right.
because I fundamentally believe, truly, for the listening audience, that authenticity is the allowing of the spontaneity of the present moment to unfold. And we box ourselves so much in that, oh my God, I'm at work, so I can't twirl and dance, even though I'm inspired to be at the coffee machine and twirl and dance. Like,
Mhm.
if we are in co-creation with creation, which we are, like, I mean, evidence proves it, guys. The universe is constantly expanding, humanity's constantly expanding. Then we're in co-creation, and it is in those inspired moments that we are like in true authenticity. And when we limit ourselves, which so often people do, more often than they ever realize, and I'm talking about even deep spiritual people. I was just sharing this story with Yanko in the community about a gentleman today who limited his connection with me because he made up a story that, like, that's going to somehow impede on me and Nana, which is weird, but still, like, we all do it. We prevent ourselves from the joy that exists all around. And I'm constantly telling people, play. Because if you
Yes.
can play, spontaneity happens all the time because you're not in your thinking mind. You bypass
Right.
your
Yes.
need to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like you're such a good role model for me, Kerri. Like what you said earlier is that if someone is kind of like sparking a reaction in me, then I get to look at myself and see like what is it in me? Like for some reason I heard that in a way that I haven't heard that before. And so now I'm going to internalize that. And then a few weeks ago when I was really going through it, you were like play, 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 play. And I feel the need to tell you an accomplishment I made last night. So I don't even know what it's called, but it's like a Japanese wooden thing with a ball and a string on it, and you try to get it into the cup. And I've had it for weeks, and that was what I wanted to do. And then I decided I wanted to juggle instead. So I've been working on juggling, and that wooden thing is sitting on my table. And I just, for the heck of it, picked it up for the first time in months with my left hand, and I'm right-handed. And I've had a problem with my right shoulder. And I had been thinking, oh, I should try this with my right hand. And I literally went like this, and it landed in the cup for the first time. And my sweetheart was there. I was like, take a picture of this. And then, like 90 seconds later, I did it again. So I've never done it before. And I did it with my non-dominant hand, and I did it on the spur of the moment.
Yep.
And my neighbor is actually the one who inspired me because he, when the weather is warm, stands outside and practices this thing. And I've watched him do it for month after month after month and get better and better. So I sent those pictures to his girlfriend and said, please share these with Joe. This is my left hand and I've never done this before. So like I got the joy. My sweetheart got the joy. I'm sharing joy with you right now. I shared it with my neighbors. I also put a picture online, and then my friend that's teaching me how to juggle. So like I played and I spread joy to all these different people.
Yeah. And because you bypassed your thinking mind, like, here's the thing, you didn't sit there for 2 hours. I should use my left hand to do this thing.
Right. I
You
literally just picked it up and went boom, boom.
Yeah. And that's where I really fundamentally believe. And again, like when we just allow ourselves to accept what is in this moment, there's just such a peace and a freedom. It's really hard to explain, but again, it's just a gift I believe we give to the world. And that is where I believe our true superpower lies. Because when you're in that space of love, you're emitting that love into the world, which predominantly exists in fear. And that love is far more powerful. Like it's just a powerful place to energetically be. So
yeah. A huge part of my learning how to build boundaries was shedding all these masks and facades that I had. I put a lot of energy into managing my image. but I
Yeah.
didn't, it was all subconscious. I didn't know that I was doing it. And like one day I decided I was going to clear out all the books on my shelves, take them off, and only put them back if I really wanted them. And I realized many of those books I've never read, but they're on my shelf because I want to give an impression. The
Ooh.
grocery bags, that the reusable bags, I bought them at Trader Joe's. I almost never shop at Trader Joe's, but I bought them because I wanted people to think this is the kind of woman who shops at Trader Joe's. Like that is how subtle my image management is. And so because this stuff is so deeply ingrained and it's been going on for so long, it's hard to see this is conditioning. This is not authenticity. So when you just mentioned, oh, you're in the workplace and you feel like dancing around at the coffee machine, like I can't imagine ever doing that.
Yeah.
But now I can
Yeah.
because you mentioned it, right? But to
No.
me, because the societal norms are so deeply ingrained in me that I wouldn't even think of doing that. But now I have thought of it because you said that.
But that's where I think, I mean, that's where going back to unconditional love, I love being triggered. I love it. So I'm going to shout out Hein, this beautiful man from Iran, right? And he is just like such a gift to me because he triggered the ever loving crap out of me for 3 weeks in my networking group. I mean, I'm like irritated by the pure presence of him. And I've shared this with him. But I realized all it was he was bringing up for me the story of me being a really little girl with a dominating father who had this very masculine energy and who is very, this is the way it is. So, but I kept leaning into the discomfort instead of shirking away and like judging him. I knew, I'm like, ooh, there's something up in there. And I was able to release it. And as soon as I did, I'm like, hi, you're the man. You show up anytime you want. And it was a me problem, not a him problem. And that's how I love unconditionally is I don't shirk away from like my like angst that comes up with somebody, even like the current administration, right? Like for me, there's certain things that cause me like this angst, but I look at it and I'm like, oh, well, what about this and what about that? And it causes me to soften into that unconditional love. And that is what joy can bring to us too, is just the softening because we can connect with people. In my other show, What's Your Story? I can't tell you how many people show up with a mask of professionalism, like this idea, but I see beyond that and they're so closed off. So I start to pick apart those little masks. And by the end of What's Your Story, and if people really watch, like if they set aside, like you can start to see the softening of the facade into the person, and then joy comes out. And I love doing it because it's like this professional, and then a twinkle starts to get into their eyes and their body becomes looser, and because I'm intuitive, I'm like, got it. And then I just lean into who they are in that moment of like surrender to who they think they needed to be, and then how they're presenting. It's so awesome to watch.
Yeah.
Yeah, that happens a lot. When you have that mindset that you have to be presented a certain way, or for people to take you seriously, or but the reality of the story is that every other person does exactly the same thing.
Everyone.
They're in their own reality and they don't care how you present yourself.
Well, I would argue that because I do get where Barb, like, we exist in a society where there is a lot of condition, a lot of habit, and a lot of ideology. The structure's fallen, right? It's already fallen. So we're starting to see where that never served. But there is right the propensity to be rejected when you allow yourself to start to break down that narrative. And yet, what I encourage people all the time, yeah, you're going to be rejected by the very people who are stuck in the what you're trying to break free from. So allow yourself to shed that without taking it personal, because in doing that, you then attract what is going to help open you up even further
Yes.
into your full expression of yourself.
Yeah, I think a huge insight for me was that like humans are judging, discerning creatures. We're going to make judgments. So I'm going to be judged. How about if I get judged for the actual Barb instead of some fake version of me? And that really helped me. And it helped me to stop judging myself so much, which helped me to be less judgmental. I mean, I wish I was not judgmental at all, but I am. Um, but at least now I can hear it and be like, oh, that's a judgment, as opposed to that's who they actually are, or that's actually what they were doing. Like
Yeah.
I attribute, like one of my biggest paradigm shifts in recovery was coming out of victim mentality, which is for me super subtle because I'm not the quintessential, like, woe is me, the world is against me, I can never win kind of victim. I'm more of like, if only that, and complaining and blaming, and realized that, wow, I've been acting like the world is acting on me. And now I get to act on the world rather than react to it. And that has been absolutely gigantic in my life. And I want to say, I think I have something like 7 or 9 episodes on my podcast about coming out of victim mentality. And that's because every time like another layer of awareness comes off, I do a podcast episode about it to be like, oh, here we go. There's more victim mentality coming along here.
Yeah. Well,
this happens a lot. I think, I've done the same thing. I've been in that mindset, but the way I see it is that it's that background that gives you the clarity. Because without it, you won't know what it is not to be in not a victim mentality. So when you have that experience, you go through the experience, you get it, and then when you shift the mindset and you get on the other side and you have the other experience, then it's like you said, very subtle. You go like, oh, I know, because you had that background that's really strong, and now you know
Right.
what the difference is.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I won't say that it's a bad thing. And people just need to go through that experience when they're ready to step on the other side.
Yeah. I
well,
think, like a mundane area of life where this played out for me was in traffic. I had this huge epiphany very early in recovery where I was in a traffic jam and I was on my way to work. And for the third time, I pumped really hard on the brakes. And this thought came into my head: I need to leave more space between cars. And I was like, oh my God, I need to leave more space between cars. I'm like, oh my God, it's me. My program is working. It's me. I'm the problem. Me not leaving space between cars is the problem. Whereas I had previously thought subconsciously the fact that there's traffic is the problem. Like I realized when I unpacked it that I had this belief that there shouldn't be traffic on the highway, at least when I'm driving. Meanwhile, highways were built for traffic.
Yep.
And so the next time I got in the car, I was a completely different driver. I drove the speed limit. I stayed in the right-hand lane. If someone pulled out in front of me, I slowed down or I speeded up or whatever I needed to do. Instead of handing my serenity over to them and like getting all upset about them, I just responded to what was happening in the moment and didn't give it this grander meaning, and realized it's not like I've never pulled out in front of anybody before. Like they're an innocent person driving who just made a mistake. It's not like they're victimizing me with their driving, and it changed everything. And that's just driving. So like, let's multiply that times how many other areas of my life?
yeah. Well, that's
But
why.
I love that experience you share, because a lot of people can relate to that experience, and like you said, it affects in a lot of different areas in life too, not only traffic, but it could be like lanes. I personally have experience of waiting on the lane for the groceries, and everybody's trying to like skip ahead or act like, oh, I have like a one item, maybe I should go in the front, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
It
yeah.
also happens in relationships. Like another insight that I had was that that I realized that in looking back at all of my relationships, I had this belief, which was subconscious, but it was operating on me, was that I'm responsible for all the good things in my relationships, and whoever I was dating was responsible for all the bad things. And when that came to light, I'm like, that's just patently ridiculous. But that's how I was operating.
Yeah.
And when I coach people, it's like that when I say that, they're like, oh shit, that's me too. Like think about it. What are the chances that one person is always responsible for all the good things and the other one is always responsible for the bad things? The chances are zero of that actually happening. So we've got to stop operating on that. And this is where, like in 12-step recovery, learning what's my part in things. When I actively seek what could I do differently? It's not about beating myself up. It's info, not ammo. It's information for me to learn, integrate, and grow from. It's not ammunition to beat myself up. It's actually empowering when I learn what my part is, because if I'm the problem, then I get to be the solution, which is so empowering. But if you think you're the victim and that they're the problem, you're never going to do anything except for complain.
Yep. For
Do you
everything.
see do you see a lot of people overgeneralizing too? Because I see that a lot too, where they say it's always happens this way. You're always the problem. It's like, oh, like in everything, not like really
Yeah.
always. Think
Right.
about this
Yeah.
twice. Does
Yeah.
it really
Yeah. When we're
always
using
happen?
that language, yeah, always and
Yeah,
never, like that, those are red
yeah,
flags for sure. Yeah.
yeah. Go ahead, Kerri. You're smiling.
I just laughing because it's just so funny how like, here's the thing for anybody out there who's like, oh my God, it's just moment by moment. It feels like it's a lot of work. And I mean, if you look back, but it's just asking yourself, how do I feel right now? Because here's ultimately what Yanko said is true. I truly believe this human experience, for whatever it's worth to you, is meant to be enjoyable, where it's meant to be an
That's right.
opportunity to just play and experiment. And I always tell people we are our own greatest scientists. We get to experience, does this work for us? Does that work for us? And I encourage you, if you are in a situation that does not feel good, right? Ask yourself, well, what could feel good? What would feel better? And then allow yourself to have those experiences. The minute you ask
Mhm.
yourself, the universe will provide you with
Mhm.
evidence to give
Mhm.
you a new experience.
Mhm.
The problem
Mhm.
is most people don't ask themselves the question, and
Mhm.
so they don't open themselves up to receive. And that is where,
Mhm.
in certain theologies, they say, ask and you shall receive. You will always receive, but most people don't want the answer. And so they
Right.
don't ask the question.
Right. And I think what most people want is for their circumstances to change. They think if the circumstances change, then I will be okay. And that means that you're relying on that which is outside yourself
Yep.
for your state of being. And you don't have to do that. And that has been taking me years to internalize. And I still have to remind myself all the time that
Yeah,
it's a delusion that the outside world can create peace for me internally.
absolutely. Well, that's why, I was talking to a beautiful person who does a lot of activism work, tons of activism work. And right now, you know, this person was sharing a story about how they engaged with the community because people are being bullied and stuff. And I said, look, I fundamentally believe that we can take action. But if your narrative internally is that somebody's being bullied, you're taking action out of fear, not in love. And that I look at some of the greatest movements, and Gandhi, right? Freeing India from British
Mhm,
rule is the
mhm,
best example that I have. Gandhi never got his people to buy into the belief that they were being victimized. He showed up in love because love
mhm.
is that movable force that can change things without violence, without divide, without um more human suffering. But we can't get to that place if we're looking at any external circumstance, any, whether it's current political climate, whether it's religious ideology, whether it's um based on whether I'm a female in the workplace, and think that we're going to experience anything different if we perceive it from a place of fear, from a place of being victimized, from a place of being bullied by life. And I shared that. And when we can stay in that place of love, right? And I always ask myself, guys, am I coming from a place of love, like real self love, because that feels very peaceful. That feels very spontaneous and very not thought out. Or am I coming from a place of fear, which is just me? I have a preconceived notion about what's going on, and I made a determination that it's not good, that it's against what I need. And if it's in that, I sit in this little chair until I come back to love. And then I'll be inspired to take an action that I know will be in a higher vibration and in a better frequency for all involved, not just me.
Love
Won't
it.
won't you say that the fear comes up from lack of control? Because that's going back to what people are trying to do. When they feel like they don't have the control of the situation, then they start to experience the fear because they feel hopeless, or like there's no anything or chance of controlling the whole thing. But then the reality of things is that it's like trying to swim against the current, because you have no control of what's going on outside. And if you realize that you're doing it out of fear of control, then you can let go of the control, and then the fear melts away.
Mm.
Well, it's so interesting. The greatest human conundrum is fear of change, and yet we it is besides, I mean, it is the one constant. It
Right.
cracks me up. I'm like,
Right. Yeah.
change is ever present. Ever present,
Right.
and yet we get
Yeah.
stuck in this belief that we have the
Mhm.
ability to prevent change from happening, you know. And
Right. Yeah.
I'm going to give you a real example. I have two daughters, 15 and 16. My daughter's going to be 17 in March. The stories that I hear from parents right now, oh my God, I can't believe it. My kid's going off to college. Oh my God, I can't believe it. My kid's driving. Like, where is the resistance to the what was inevitable? Like, and this is where I was thinking about this yesterday going to bed. My daughter is steeped in work. She's in AP and stuff. I could be like, wow, I never spend time with her. Or I could get up, go in her bedroom, and be in the presence with her and sit with her while she's doing her AP work, right? And that's connection. I don't worry about change. I worry about being present with whatever I'm doing in this
Mhm.
moment, because
Mhm.
that's all I can control. It's
Mhm.
all I can control. I'm not worried about Julie turning 17, 18, 19, going to college. I'm worried about how am I experiencing this beautiful soul that I get the gift of knowing in this present
Mhm.
moment, and how can I just exist in that? And that's
Yeah.
where our true power and peace lies, is not
Yeah.
making up stories about what the future holds, but really allowing ourselves to have the conversation, have our listening ears, share in this energy exchange that's unfolding in this
Mhm.
present moment.
Yeah. I tend to coach a lot of people at times of transition. So they're about to get a divorce, or they just got a divorce, or about to retire, they're becoming empty nesters, they're changing their careers. And the fear is always, I don't know what's going to happen. And I'm like, I'm going to give you a newsflash. You literally never know what's going to happen. You just think
That's
that you
right.
know what's going to happen. And I have a block that says, "This too shall pass," that's on my altar. And what I know about that is people tend to bring up that saying when things are going poorly or when they're feeling difficult, but they don't think that about the good things. They think things are going to be good. I'm going to get to a state where everything is going to be good and it's going to stay there. No, it's not. Shit is going to happen. Like, good things will happen and bad things will happen. Sometimes a whole bunch of good things will happen in a row, and sometimes a whole bunch of bad things will happen in a row. But rest assured, good and bad things will happen, and they will continue to happen.
Well, I think that's where self-love and the ability to nurture oneself comes into play. Like, and this is where we give away our power. We
Mm.
expect other people to nurture us. And I'm like, hell no. If something challenging is unfolding, then I want to be able to really nurture, care, and support myself through that
Mhm.
discomfort. And
Mhm.
when something really, really good is unfolding, I want to be able to
Mhm.
experience that by myself in pure bliss without feeling like it's not of value because I'm not sharing it with somebody else. And that is the true power of unconditional self-love, is being
Mhm.
able to nurture and hold space
Mhm.
for yourself in any given moment without the expectation that somebody else do it for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I do have to go in a couple minutes because I have a
Yeah.
client.
No, it was a gift that you showed up. We are
Yeah,
so grateful. Are there any
thank you.
imparting words that you want to share with the community before you leave?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really to keep the focus on yourself internally and what, because that's what you can control. I mean, my experience, especially with my clients, is they're so focused on the outer world. What is he doing? What is she doing? What are they doing? What does he need? What does the situation need? And it doesn't mean that we neglect those things, but we need to start in here. Like, what do you want, need, like, prefer? What's okay and not okay? And then act on that, and then you'll have a lot more energy to do the things that you want to do to have an impact on the world.
Yep, agreed. I love it.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say that's wonderful. Go back to yourself and figure it out what you really want.
Mhm.
And once
Right.
your cup is full, then you can overflow and share with
Mhm.
others.
That's exactly the metaphor that I use. Like, you want to pour from the overflow, not from an empty cup. And the
That's
only way
right.
to have overflow is if you fill your cup first.
That's
Yep.
Yeah.
right. I love it. I love it.
Yeah. Well, that's a great note on which I will leave. Thank you both so much. This was an amazing conversation.
You're
And
welcome
Thank you,
anytime.
Barb.
yes, thank you. Thank
Welcome
you
to
so
come
much.
back at any time. Yes.
I'd love to. Absolutely. I would love to. All
Awesome.
right. Enjoy the weekend.
I